Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Your host. Welcome, folks. By George, there's so many things that are happening here now from a national perspective, international perspective, but still we're here at home in Oregon, and we're having our issues too. I began this whole idea of focusing on issues, local issues, here in the city of Portland, because it happens to be the largest city of the state of Oregon, and anything that happens in Portland tends to have some impact on counties outside of cities outside of Portland. Mm-hmm. And so we've been using that as a reference to talk to the issues. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at the legislature, I mean, all the elected officials, the majority of those individuals come from here. The majority, the key component, majority aspect of it. So I think we want to continue doing that. However, we may want to comment on some, from a national perspective, because I think it's an issue that needs to be discussed. And I know that the viewing audience, many of you, you're right here. You're tuning in on us for us and trying to get some sense of guidance as to what's going on. And you're depending upon us and my guests and myself and the guests that I normally bring in. And a lot of times I'm bringing folks in who have varying backgrounds. It's not about pro-negatives about the individuals that I bring on. It's about that they identify with the issues that we're living with day in and day out. And sometimes there's a small percentage of you out there that don't respect that, and then the majority of you are looking forward to being a part of the discussion. And I've made several adjustments since I've been sitting here in this chair for a number of years, and then one of which was that when I first began, I used to take on calls and things of that nature, and found that wasn't, and basically it left out the majority because the person would pretty well try to garner the show for themselves. Mm-hmm. and the same thing with the guests. As far as I'm concerned, a guest is about an issue. So whenever I invite someone to come to the table and join me to talk about issues, it's someone that identifies with an issue. It's either their background, whether they've run for office, depending upon how do they relate to those issues. I thought I'd begin that way because too often, we tend to forget while we're watching the show. If it's just about me and trying to look at me or my guests in a negative way, personally, taking it personal, then you don't get the information that I'm trying to share. Because the whole show is about informing and educating you. Mm-hmm. That's basically what I try to do. I make an attempt to do that. Sometimes it's a major concern of mine, and because of all the things that are happening statewide, nationwide right now, it really bothers me that media has gotten to the point that, in all due respect, it's more sound bites than it is about getting the issues. A lot of times the issues and the information is so short-lived, and the people that are trying to get some feeling of direction of what should I do on a particular point don't get enough time to be able to listen to what's coming from media. And so media plays a major role, but I'm having some concerns as far as are they giving enough time for any specific issue so the public as a whole can benefit, because we are in need of dotting our I's again, such that we should be looking for a better way of life, family, things of that, just the basic stuff, and so I want to throw that out. A good for instance is that, as you know, for quite some time now I've worn this cover. I've identified myself in military, and at the same time I try to find a guest sometime to basically, if they've got if they're military too, and they basically use the cover or whatever symbol or whatever. And as you note today, I'm wearing my tie, this Stars and Stripes, and I think about that, and then some say, why are you doing? Well, I'm doing this because, in all due respect, many of the viewing audience are losing a little respect for this flag, and I say that seriously because I made an effort. I made an effort around here in the city, at the county for that matter, to start of getting before the county before they open up their meetings with a pledge of allegiance to the flag, and it wasn't a prayer, but it was. But in all due respect, that was a standing kind of a thing with us from as far as gatherings for the folks. And I mean, meaning that they would always lead off with as far as public government kind of facilities, they would always start off with a prayer and a pledge allegiance to the flag, and it was all inclusive. It wasn't a divided deal. It was all inclusive, meaning that we were all, quote, Americans.
Yeah.
And there's a point blank, and we're losing that. And I went through that, and I can say it now factually. I went and made an attempt, if you will, to go before the county, and started out with raising the flag. Even though I had only 3 minutes, I was able to at least come up with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and I wasn't also giving the prayer aspect, but I was pushing the flag. And it's really what bothers me was that the commissioners would never react to that. There was no one reaching out to me and saying, thank you, Bruce, not necessarily me personally, but thank you for reminding me of what this country is all about. It's about this flag. I mean, we've gone pluses and minuses and this, that, and the other, but it's still the USA, the United States of America, where we got a little of everybody worldwide, if you will, lives here. And everybody's trying to get here aspect of it. Well, I tell you right up front with you, if we don't spend a little bit more time recognizing what this flag means and identifying the flag and the prayer at the beginning of some place where we see this on an ongoing basis, we're gonna have problems. But we're having problems now, for that matter. And I'm just saying it's growing pain, but that means I'm looking at what's going on. We need to do something about it. So I want you to know that's why I do the flag, and that's why I do the cover, if you will, and recognize the Vietnam War aspect of it and the Marine Corps, that kind of a deal. But that came as a result of the draft. The draft came in making sure that all the males participated. Females were there also too, but the males particularly were there. And you were introduced to weapons if you'd never seen them before, and organizational kind of a deal. And everybody had a career. Everybody had a job in the military. And whether you were in the military or, for instance, in your state militia, and that's the other state, but still the same military concept, if you will, and whatever. And so. Very important. So I wanted to start off this way because after looking at all of the things about the President of the United States and what we're going through now, and everybody's singling out one person called, his name happened to be President Trump. Well, in all due respect, I don't look at him. I look at who's in the seat and what he represents. It's the issues that the person who sits in that seat has to address. And just attacking someone personally is not going to help the situation out at all. And this present situation, boy, it's just really is just something else. In all due respect, degrading a female right off front, we're degrading women from the standpoint of saying prostitutes, and then the idea of paying someone for a sexual act. And that's basically what we're looking at. That's what everybody's looking at. And we're making, and then the other deal, a race, playing the race issue aspect of it. A DA who happens to be an African American, you know what I mean? And to me, that I saw education there, but I also knew New York. I'm very familiar with New York, but you got an African American who happens to be a DA, and you got a white female who's identified as a prostitute somewhat, and you've got a male who happens to be president of the United States paying for a sexual act. Is that the issue? So anyway, I thought maybe we I want to make sure you share. I want to share that with you. I spend quite a bit of time looking at these political events around the country, and I eat through the news, even though they're short. But I've been doing it for so long that I'm able to go through about 5 different mediums to get the gist, and that's what I see. So what do you see? So we're going to start off with the show. I got John Sweeney here, who's been around here for quite some time. He's been active in community, and he's run for office before. Kind of similar background that I have, and a lot of times he's very interested in the issues. We discuss the issues, and I guess that's why I've got him here with me today. He's a former government worker. He worked for the city of Portland in parks, of all things. And if anybody knows anything about community and people, he was right there with all of the folks there. And that's a very important. And he ran for office. He ran for office. He was sitting in a seat where he got elected once, and then from that point on, he stayed. But he stayed there. He wasn't in the seat particularly, but he stayed involved. And so I thought I'd bring him on today, and we'll have just kind of a general discussion, John. And so we'll have a little general discussion. I've shared with him what my feelings were about. We'll go from a national perspective and we'll bring it down. I know the gun issue is huge, but that's nationwide too, to a certain degree. But this particular issue with reference to how we're getting somewhat familiar of identifying with folks who our leadership. The President of the United States. It's not that he just happens to be Donald Trump. Whoever sits in that chair should be responding to issues. Well, that's basically what I thought that was the process for the election process, but it's gotten to be a more personal thing than anything else. And if that's going to be the case, we got a problem. So that's just my perspective. So John, welcome.
It's glad to be here again.
Okay.
And you mentioned the flag. When you're overseas and see it, like I was in Okinawa and in Germany, it just really grabs you when you're serving under it and you are overseas. It really gets to you.
And you were National Guard, right?
Yeah.
You got his cover. There's his cover right there. It's Army National Guard, right?
Yeah. I was in the Army National Guard and then the Army Reserve, and I had a break and then back to the Army National Guard, and I started as a private E1 and retired as a Captain 03.
There you go. Yeah, I did the Marine Corps. I did my 10, and then I went to the Army National Guard, and there was a warrant there, and that's basically what I landed up with, aspect of it. But let's talk about. I shared with you what I thought about this whole issue that we're living with now for the presidency.
Yeah.
What do you think? What's your thought about?
Well,
your feelings about it?
It's a lot of stink for nothing, and I don't think it's going to mount to anything. It's a lot of theater, and it's a stretch. It's like Bill Clinton, why they had him for something really big, and then they went after him for getting the gal across the desk in the Oval Office, and this is kind of the same thing with President Trump, that they say a lot of things, but and a lot of people don't like Trump, but you got to give him credit, because when he was president and then COVID come along, and he did Operation Warp Speed and got the vaccines and stuff. If it had been somebody, Hillary Clinton, they'd probably still in the trial stage, and a lot of us would be dying.
Good point you made. In fact, good point from the standpoint, it was an issue. He brought it to the table, but for some strange reason, it broke away. Meaning the issue the issue got personal on his. Had we stayed to the issue, And you should, I'm answering the question from my perspective. I saw media coming in, breaking up, and the divide between the R's and the D's, if you will. You got my point? And so consequently, they got away from the issue of the pandemic, and that's how we got into it, because we ignored it.
Yeah.
I mean, had we spent a little bit more time finding out where it came from, it kind of sits out here today. It came from China. You know what I mean? But had we spent the time and stayed there, because if you notice, even when they were going through all those discussions, then it was Trump and it was these and the R's and Trump and whatever, and so consequently, it wasn't about the pandemic.
No,
it was a personal thing.
And the other thing about it, in my last 5 years, I was a nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare officer, and the thing is, the people that affected most by radiation and diseases is the younger than 20, because they haven't built up their system, and the people over 60, because their resistance is deteriorating. And the deal is, we're on the back side of that, and the deal is, if he hadn't done the warp speed, you and I might not be here.
Oh, wow. Well, even worse than that, and then you think about what was in place before that situation. We were already taking flu shots.
Yep.
And people were dying.
Yeah.
Okay? We were taking flu shot. Automatically, you get your flu shot, right? You got me? And you get the other shots that normally comes when you're using the kinds of fertilizers today.
Yeah.
Got me? And we're eating all kinds of things, right? You got my point? And so that to me should have been just another natural piece. But somebody disturbed that. It was man-made, right? Man-made kind of a situation with reference to the coronavirus and kind of a deal. And so we didn't have my point, if it was a natural disease based on what we're eating, then people would be basically, let's vet that system. Let's find out what are we eating, and making sure that we're not eating those kinds of things, right? You got me?
Yeah.
To the public. But we didn't have enough time to discuss it, if you will. So here we are still sitting today, got me? We're still sitting today, and we're still, you don't know whether or not you're going to have to wear the mask or not wear the mask.
Yeah, you talk about bad things, in that report there from Bob Livingston, it says they've detected over 200 different chemicals in umbilical cords. Got them out there, and they checked it out and run it through the chemical spectrums, and there was 238, but it's over 200, in your baby's umbilical cord.
Wow.
And I was just, good thing I was sitting down when I read that.
Right. But a lot of things coming, and with technology now, they're putting a lot of this stuff on technology, even from a visual standpoint aspect of it. But how many people are focusing on those issues?
Well,
how many people are basically turning on the tube and looking at? Not that many.
No, it's getting less and less, and in fact, the people now are driving around. They're listening to their YouTubes or whatever it is on their, just music and all that. They're not listening to the radios. When you get that, 5 minutes at the top and the bottom of the hour of a little bit tidbit of news. And in fact, in the new electric cars, they're not putting AM radios on because the deal is the electric systems interfere with AM radios. So, and that's how a lot of people will get an emergency. There's an emergency. The thing is that push come to shove would be the fact that you could go out in your car and turn on your AM radio to get the latest news. Say the fact that they're going to have the bulletins at 6 p.m. or they're going to have the bulletins at 9 a.m. But that's going down, and so many people, they're not listening to the news, and it's kind of like they come out of school, whether they finish just high school or college, whatever it is. It seems like they don't get involved anymore.
Well, again, and at the same time, now their involvement, like you said, they should be doing, getting involved and checking out what those issues are. But everybody has their own TV camera now.
But a lot of them, they don't want the heavy stuff that we deal with.
No, but it's their own. My point is that they're basically producing. That's the thing that's the point I'm trying to make. They're producing.
Yeah.
They're not looking at this other visual. They're producing the visual. You got me? And But again, I want to get back to what we're having to live with from a national perspective right now, aspect of it, with this presidential situation aspect that we're looking at right now, with the Trump thing and what's happening, and supposedly, here we are, we're doing this piece, and people will be looking at this thing Sunday. Hopefully, they can look at this Sunday and Tuesday evening, but Tuesday of next week. Tuesday of next week, supposedly, there's supposed to be 30 different issues that they're associating with Trump, with President Trump, right?
Correct. I believe it's about 30,
They're about 30, but then the one issue they've been focusing on has been the sex thing.
Yeah.
Just focusing on that. And people are, and then the other thing about that whole issue with the sex thing, it talks about the sex thing, and a lot of folks don't understand that. And race is another issue of that piece, because of the DA happens to be an African American.
Yeah.
Got me? And we're already having problems with that divide. We've been fighting the not assimilating the whole issue of Americans, right, across the board, but still using the word of race. And when you start thinking about race right up front, is between an African American and a white, a Caucasian.
And the other thing, if you notice, the pictures that they're taking of the DA are not very flattering.
No.
I mean,
but see, he is sitting in the DA's seat.
Yeah.
But the decision to bring this forward was not his.
No.
He had to present it to a committee for our structure, and I've not seen any photos of that. Was it 20-some people that are sitting at that on the committee that basically said okay to this whole issue of that he committed a felony or something like that, and he violated the election laws or whatever. My point is that you don't see those folks. You only saw one person.
But that's the New York swamp.
No, but my point is that that's all over the place.
Oh yeah.
See, that's why I make the point about Trump aspect of it. He's not making the total decision.
Yeah.
He got a cabinet, if you will. They got to vote on this stuff aspect of it, and then it goes back. And so I'm just making that point about it should not be about the individual.
Yeah.
The way we are doing it is not helping us out as a nation, and what this country is about. Sure enough, I mean, you can read about American history, Black American history, and my vision goes back to Lincoln. My vision goes back to Lincoln, and then if you want to go beyond that, then there's the Revolutionary War, when all the poor whites was shipped here to this country to come over here and do the land and whatever, and send all the good stuff back there, and then they'd eat all the other stuff, and then they just got tired of it. But during that particular time, the folks, they needed a labor force to pick up to basically clear the land in the South and whatever, and they ended up with going to Africa, because most of those folks that were living in Africa could work in that kind of weather. Okay?
Oh yeah.
And so they brought them over here, and then the chiefs. They had a lot of the chieftains up in Africa who were fighting one another. Basically, would take on slaves, if you will, or take on folks after they had fight, and they'd sell them to folks who were looking for a labor force.
Yeah.
That's basically what happened, and they brought them back here, and then they worked in the cotton field and tobacco and whatever, and that became the currency, the currency of the United States. And I'm just giving a quick brief history, if you will, of where we are today and how we got here. But we made an issue of that. Then then we had the Revolutionary War, and African Americans fought in that war, in that aspect of it. And then after that, we had the Civil War.
Yeah.
And then there was the divide. There was money, because cotton and tobacco and things of that nature was a currency during that time. So consequently, the people in the South had the advantage, and the people in the North, well, they were basically being a little bit more advanced, right?
Yeah.
They had nothing, so consequently, there was a war, right? And jumped Lincoln. Lincoln came up, jumped up, ran for president of these United States, knocking on a few doors, right? He became president, and his thing was, as his platform, his major platform was the assimilation. Because the fathers who had put together the Declaration of Independence had, in some cases, a number of them had identified African Americans as not being a part of.
Yeah.
And Lincoln was bringing it back to the table. Yeah, and I'm bringing it in just a kind of just very, very simple way of. There's a lot of other complexity. You can read all this, that, and the other. But I'm just saying what I've seen, and that's my observation of history as I've read it. And,
yeah, you know, the deal as you mentioned about the blacks, people that work in that climate, and I tell all my friends that in the Guard and in the Reserve, I says, if you have to go back for those tough schools, don't go in the summertime, because I went to my officer's basic in November to December, and then I went to my officer's advance in July and August. Well, the advanced course was kind of just like going to school, kind of real gentleman's course. If it had been the reverse, it would have been really tough to make it, because you go from this mild climate here and you get there and you're talking, you know, 80, 85 degrees and 80 to 90% humidity. I mean, you are wiped, you know, and a lot of times you don't have a week or two to climatize. You hit the floor running, and the deal is, you come from this area, because I've had some friends that says, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, guess what? They go back there, and next thing you know, they're back real soon, because they washed out, because the climate got to them. You know, it just, you know, sometimes they talk about the humidity here, why it might get to 70% once in a while, but the deal is it's regularly over 80% there. And when it's 80, you know, 80 degrees and 80%, my wife and I went back to Philadelphia, and it was 84 degrees and 80%. We could hardly drag ourselves on a plane the last day. It was just terrible.
Well, you know, one can talk about that piece, but again, too, still, we still haven't assimilated.
No.
We have not assimilated. I'm going right back to the same deal with the whole issue with Trump aspect of it.
Yeah.
We've got to understand what's happening in the public, and I'm talking to you now. You got to go beyond just the politics of New York right now. And if you wanted to Google it and find out what is the definition of New York, how many people are living over there, and who's living over there, it's a whole different climate aspect of it.
Oh yeah.
It's a whole different climate. But however, you know, we had a president right now that was born and raised in New York.
Yeah.
And that was Trump aspect of it. And they've got a whole different mindset in that arena. But that's there. Like we have something different here.
Yeah.
I mean, we're different here in the state of Oregon aspect of it. And race has been a major issue here in the state of Oregon. People are still referencing the fact that Oregon is the most racist state in the United States aspect of it. They make that reference aspect of it. And naturally, on this show, we're constantly trying to figure out how do we break that, because I don't like the idea of having to deal and talk about race every day of the week. You got me? I mean, I'm just like anyone else. I mean, if that was the case and I was surviving on that, it'd be a different ball game. But that's not what one survived. I don't like the idea of people using it as an excuse to not deal with what my issues.
When I was going to school, the first 4-year grades, because I didn't go to kindergarten, was at Giles Lake School. And I did live in Vanport at the very beginning of the war.
Okay.
And then my dad got drafted, and then we moved to Southeast with my aunt. And then after the war, moved to Giles Lake. And in the 1948 flood in Vanport, and a lot of people had moved out of it. And then all of a sudden, when people would come in looking for a place to stay, because next to St. Helens Road was the white area, and then next to the river was the black area. And the school at Giles Lake was about 50-50. And so when the Vanport flood came, the people would show up, and they need 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. They just grabbed a sheet and handed it to them. So suddenly, in 1948, you had white people living next to black people never before, and you have black people living next to white people never happened before. And so in one area right off of St. Helens Road, why I had a lot of black friends, and some of them, that they were going to school with me, and the deal is that we were walking to and from school, and that was quite a change for a lot of them. And of course, when my dad come back after the war and we're there, and we'd go down to the recreation center. That's what they call community centers, and we'd hear our fathers talk. And there was 3 groups. There was a group who spent the entire war in the defense plants, and a lot of them were really dangerous places, the shipyards and defense plants. Then you had a lot of them spent the entire war in the military somewhere, and then a lot of them, like my dad, who spent some of the time in the shipyards and defense plants and in the war, and actually you get talking to those people, including my dad, they actually felt safer being in the war zone than working in some of the civilian industries. I remember there was an explosion at one of the ships, and they showed pictures of guys hanging by the rafters. The thing blew up, and so
in Vanport?
I don't remember where the explosion was, but I remember seeing it in the newspaper. Yeah,
right.
And the only thing they had left on was their hard hats was strapped on their heads, and their boots, because their clothes were burned off, and they're just hanging all over the place. And I guess that was a fairly frequent happening thing.
Wow.
Because the concept of OSHA wasn't there. It was get it done, get it done, get it done. And if you dropped on the job, why, they just shuffled you off to the side, and so that was a thing. But to hear the fathers talk about how it was in the war, and you could hear them talking about the hopes for the better world, because things just had to get better, and so that's one real interesting thing. And so, like I said, and also in the classroom, you got a big table, and they had us all mixed up, and then they let us talk. Well, you got somebody on each side's black, and the deal is, and they said you could talk. Well, you're going to talk because you can talk, and there's another kid to talk to, and so that got some good mixing around. But
what happened to that, though? Then, now, one thing I got out, I've interviewed a couple of people, some of the old timers that lived in Vanport also too, and rumors had it that someone purposely blew up that levee. Did you ever hear anything like that?
I wouldn't doubt it a bit.
Okay, yeah.
And they did it at kind of the time of day that people weren't that many people there, and had a neighbor that moved in, and they were in their truck just going up to Kenton, and they were just driving out when it happened. And anyway, they went back later and got some of their stuff, and this guy had an old truck, 2 trucks with solid rubber tires, and he'd get up in the morning and he'd leave for work at 5 in the morning. Nobody had to set an alarm clock because his truck just vibrated everything.
Right, okay.
Yeah, solid rubber tires, chain drive, and when he wanted to tune up the engine, there was a deal he can affect and slide the whole thing out on a drawer and do the work on it, slide it back in, lock her back up, and drive off. And but they were. It's like you go around the world. People are really nice. Most people are nice. It's the governments that are kind of bad. But. Yeah, so it's...
but getting to that point, like I said, I had a good discussion with some of the old timers that were living there, and they're saying that Bruce, it was blown up. Yeah, the levee was blown up purposely because of the whole issue of race again.
Yeah.
That was the major thing, that they didn't like that. In fact, it was considered to be the largest city and the largest city in the state too. They call it Vanport, with Vancouver and Portland, right?
Yeah, it was the second. If it had been a city, it would have been the second largest city in the state.
What was it?
Portland was the biggest.
Well, I'm still saying
Vanport would have been the second biggest city in Oregon if it had been an incorporated city.
Okay, but I'm just saying. But at the time, though,
yeah,
it was both Vanport. Now, Vanport is Vancouver and Portland, right?
Yeah, that was the concept.
That was the concept.
Name, yeah.
But it was in Portland.
Yeah.
I mean, it was in Oregon. Let's put it that way.
And that's where Portland State College started.
Okay.
Portland State University now.
Okay.
And but yeah, so in fact, if you go out there to Delta Park and you see the barn over there, that was from the golf course before the war, because that area was a golf course, and the big field house was there, and actually. In my office, when I was in the parks, that was an office, there was marks on the floor where they used to have a restaurant in there. And the floor of that thing is 20.48 feet above sea level, and that's 100 miles from the ocean by river.
Wow.
So, in fact, if you get up there on Marine Drive and the water's as smooth as glass, if you see that line across there, that's the sea level thing, and if you watch it as the tide comes in or out, that thing will move back and forth.
Really?
The ocean tides affect the Columbia River clear to Bonneville Dam, and the Willamette River clear to the falls and Oregon City. So, so
evidently,
see it up and down, it's because of the tides, and it depends on how much the tides work, the alignment of the moon and the sun and all that stuff. And so, and you get high tide every 13 hours. You get low tide every 13 hours. So that's why you see the thing fluctuate so much.
Well, it's interesting why you make that statement. As we were having this discussion on one of the shows I was doing, I was thinking about that, and now you brought the issue up again, which is great. It was at the tide change aspect of it when it was blown up, I said. When it was blown up, so consequently they just came in, rushed it big time.
Yeah.
It wasn't low tide. I think it was high, whatever the tide was going up or down.
No.
But I tried to get the Oregon Historical Society talking a little bit about it, but they never did follow up on the peace aspect of it.
Well, if I was going to do that, say blow that thing, I'd actually want to do it because in May you got quite a runoff.
Right.
I'd actually want to do it at low tide. Because see, then it would, as your water's starting to come in, then you have the tide come in,
right.
then that's the equivalent of building a dam, because that water's coming and stopping and blowing that in. In fact,
that's probably when it happened.
I was thinking I'll write up a thing and send it to them about, they're talking about it like Iran and some of these little places have bombs, and the thing is the atomic bombs, and he says, well, they don't have bombers and they don't have missiles. Well, they could just put an atomic device on a ship and they could just float the thing up some of these rivers. And you take a look at say the United States, they could come around there and just have them come in on low tide, do the damage, say right there at the I-5 bridge, because that would damage the 205 and the railroads, which would really muck up the major transportation. And you blow the thing up, you vaporize a lot of water, and then you got all this dirt that's going to go up in the air and it's going to come back down. Then the high tide's going to come in, and especially if you have it lined up for an extreme high tide, it's going to flood everything. And then when it goes back out, and the stuff will get out in the Pacific Ocean and come down the coast and wipe out a lot of marine life along the edges, and say if you're having a whale migration, that'll be the end of them. And you can do that by the time zones as they come across.
Wow.
And you could do it all at once, or you could just do it every hour. And ideally, if you do it in the winter, say about Thanksgiving time, because a lot of people are away, and the thing is that the electromagnetic pulse would short circuit a lot of our electronics nowadays. You know, basically like all of your gasoline cars starting in the very late 60s, electronic ignitions, and then your diesel vehicles went to electronics in 1994. So there's a lot of stuff that would no longer run, and they said they actually had the thing of detonating a 100 megaton bomb 100 miles above Omaha, Nebraska, and that would do the job. And one of the things is that people that would be killed immediately are those who are on the phone, are those who are in the air in unshielded electric systems in the airplanes. So chances are the only planes that would have a chance of surviving would be the old stick and rudder type, and it might shut their engines off if they're fairly new, and they'd have a chance to glide down. But if you're looking at fly-by-wire, why, it could be in real bad shape, because because the engines would stop and your lights go out, and your controls would shut off. And a lot of these modern aircraft, you have to have that computer working, because you're holding the control like this, but all of the little ailerons and rudders and trim tabs are moving a lot, even though you're holding the yoke like that. So, but this would be devastating, because like Walker Siltronics out there, the stuff that's even being made on the production line would be frozen from the EMP, electromagnetic pulse. And so, and they can get up there, and there would be a way to hit the particular dams in such a way around the Great Lakes, you could actually drain the Great Lakes.
Well, you know, I'm appreciating that conversation, and at the same time, I'm wanting to go back to where we were in regards to reflecting what's happening nationwide as far as the presidency aspect of it, because it's a very important time right now, and people are so stressed out with all of the other things that with weather and this, that, and the other, and naturally I was concerned about how race is being brought to the table today. Like, we added another factor that will stress us out even more. You got my point?
Yeah.
And it's a very important piece, and so it's been neat that you shared that discussion about Vanport, and you live there, and some of the things in there. And again, like I said, I interviewed a couple of people about old timers about Vanport. They lived in Vanport, and the rumors were during that time that someone had blown up the levee to get rid of the blacks, so to speak. And then there was another effort to get rid of the blacks after the shipyard, after the war aspect of it. A number of blacks wanted to reside here, but there was no outreaching to the blacks in Vanport to basically get them homes, and because only a few stayed, but the majority were basically out. Any thoughts of that? Did you see any of that during that time? Some of your friends might have left or something?
Well, another thing about the Vanport housing, it was built for, because a lot of people were coming from areas that had big families. So when you went in to had your apartment, and there was 3 bedrooms. I mean, for the kids, you had big bedrooms because you had lots of kids.
Right.
And I talked to some of the people later on in life, and they said that living in Vanport is some of the best housing they ever had, because
really?
The
big rooms.
Big rooms. Because when I was there, it was just my mom and dad and my oldest sister and myself, and we had a great big bedroom. And in fact, we had scarlet fever, so we had to stay locked up in the dark for 3 weeks, because that was the treatment for scarlet fever back in those days, to keep you from going blind. And but I met some of the people later on, and they were adults then, and they were talking about how the facilities were good, and of course.
What was the population in the area during that particular time that you know of? Just a number.
It was over 40,000.
Over 40,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it took actually a long time before there was more than one city over 50,000. And that was Portland at 300,000. See, and so it suddenly had a building boom when he got the .com in, and all of a sudden, Beaverton and Gresham and all that, all of a sudden they sprung and got to be over 50,000 and over 100,000. But you don't go that far back. When I was in high school, which we're talking late 50s, Portland had about 300 to 350,000, and there were no other cities over 50,000.
So
the whole state.
So it all stemmed for that Vanport Portland deal. Instead of just expanded, right, so to speak, and annexed accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So you know, like they talk, you know, the Oregon has about 1% of the population of the whole country. See, so that's why it's different. In fact, they're interviewing some people from the South. They happen to be black, and they're up here in Oregon. It says it looks so strange. There's hardly anybody that looks like us, and they were adjusting to it. So it's like some people, white people here, that go back there to the east, and sometimes they're in the minority. But he says, you know, most people are good, and so it just works out good.
Yeah.
So,
well, like I said, it gave us an opportunity to talk about the whole issue of assimilation and how, with all due respect, Oregon was behind the group that basically were sort of like in power during that particular time. Were not interested in assimilation. Let's put it that way. and until today, they're still around, so to speak.
But I think there's groups at different levels, and they want us at the bottom fighting.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and they've got the press to stir this and to stir that. It's just like with the press, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. You know, and they keep turning it all over because they want to keep us stirred up, and you know, look at the criminal justice industrial complex as convictions are us, because they like to have a moderate crime rate, so people are stirred up and they're concerned, but they don't want it so much that we're outraged. And the way you can look at that, you look at Los Angeles. You know, you've got blacks killing blacks, and you got Mexicans killing Mexicans, and you got Mexicans killing blacks, blacks killing Mexicans, and that's okay for their purposes. But once they go out into a wide area, a rich wide area, then they stop on them. But the rest of the time, they're just kind of feeding them along, because to the high elite, it's working to their advantage.
Well, you know, you make a good point. Then you bring it home here to Oregon and i.e. Portland, and you hear the same kind of scenario. But when you start thinking about all of the so-called the folks who are driving those cars all over the place, you know, just wrecking them and having that kind of a deal. But I don't see
the street racing.
Yeah, but I don't see any photos on the tube. I don't. Are there blacks there driving them cars? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Whites and Asians, that's their game.
Yeah, see, so that gets me. And then I also think about the shootings of late. You see, I see the black faces, but it ain't all blacks.
No.
The majority of them are white. And I'll just be straight up with you. You know what I'm saying? But still, there's a point I'm making here. I'm saying if we're having a problem like this aspect of it, it's not the color of the skin, it's the visual person that's doing the shooting. So my point is that if there people are caught in this, that, and the other routine, put the photos up there.
Yeah.
Because because where we are right now, suppose it's saying the DA doesn't do anything, right? That's basically what people are saying. But he's got to go behind the books according to whatever. But the fact of the matter is, when people are caught doing some harm, they should put those photos out there.
Yeah.
And so,
but you'd be embarrassing those poor people, see, and that's the whole thing.
Yeah, but the embarrassment, man, if you just got all blacks up there here in Portland, and at the same time they're saying we don't have a black population here, I'm saying, wait a minute, but we still got a whole bunch of shooting. Where are they getting the guns? Are the guns being sold by black folks? I mean, I'm kind of maybe getting off a target, but my point is that I'm still talking about assimilation. That doesn't help assimilation if in fact we're going to try to avert that whole piece, let's put the visual. If the DA can't keep them in the institution or whatever, blah blah blah, then put the faces on when they're caught. When the police catches them, boom. The media should be there to take the photo of the person, put him on the deal, and then people say, "Oh, I recognize him." Oh, and then maybe you might get a little bounty if you got in the background know where the person is, because people are scared. We got a problem, and we're just not as organized as far as I'm concerned as we should be on this whole issue of crime. Got me? And people don't realize that we also we passed the law for drugs, right?
Yeah.
And then they're saying, well, gee whiz, you're limited in terms of how much you can smoke. Well, do you think the people who buys it are saying, well, I'm a limit, please don't give me just a little.
No,
give me
that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. see. So they ought to even have cameras in these stores. I mean, I'm just trying to say, if we're going to talk about the drug, who's buying this stuff? For what? I mean, is it different than alcohol? I mean,
well, they legalized marijuana, figuring, well, that's going to solve the problem. Well, the black market marijuana sales are still out there going wild.
Right.
And then they have all this other stuff coming in, and especially all this fentanyl from China, and they're killing our 17 to.
But see, that's the other market. But that's the other market. So now it's not marijuana; it's the pills. You can get the pills cheaper than you can if you had to go to the store and buy marijuana in the store as opposed to getting it on the street. It'll cost you twice as much, right? Got me?
Yeah, but
if you don't have the money, so get the fentanyl, because that fentanyl, you can get a whole bunch of pills, right?
Yeah, but the deal is it can kill you too.
No, but I'm just saying, but it's being sold.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be so conservative. No, I'm still saying we're playing the race card aspect of it and this stuff, and we can't do that if we're going to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Because this thing is huge right now, and our young people are really having some tough times, and so we're going to have to really start. If we're going to solve the problem of drugs, we're going to have to come up with some new tactics, because it bothers me that so many young people are involved in this process.
Yeah.
And when we came up, we had options. We can go to the military. There's expungement. There's all kinds of stuff. You can get in the Guard and all that other stuff. And a lot of times there's some benefits when you come back to looking for jobs. The employer will hire you before they'll hire anybody else. In many ways, if you got any kind of a military background, got me?
Well, I think a lot of it's a lot of the young people don't have jobs.
But why? You ask yourself the why.
They're getting financial support because the deal is they don't need to work. So.
Right, but at the same time, are they doing voc ed like we came through? Nope. The education system does not carry voc ed. I'm from voc ed. I'm a voc ed kind of a guy. I learned carpentry and plumbing, all that kind of stuff when I was going to school. And welding and this, that, and the other. We don't have that anymore. Why? You got me? So we can't blame the kids and the young people right off the bat. We got to look at ourselves, find out who's basically getting elected to those school boards. What kind of background do they have?
It's a clique, and especially like in the Portland public schools, you have to live in the district, but the deal is you got to campaign district wide.
Yeah.
And then you have the clique that they're pushing, like the newspaper and the press, that this one's good and that one's good. Well, it's not doing good, and because I went to Benson Tech for 3.5 years.
Right.
And even the experience that I had at Kellogg School in 7th, 8th grade, to learn basic tools, I learned real quick that I was not going to be a woodworker, because they had a little thing I had to work on. Tap a little, didn't work, and then tap a little harder. Next thing you know, I had toothpicks all over the place. But I could put stuff back. I could put stuff together, and I could drive stuff.
Right.
And in fact, I had some friends about my Suburban going through the brush. I says, I don't like breaking up my equipment. And then I says, even when in the military, I didn't want to break up my equipment because I might have to use it when somebody's shooting at me.
Well, John, this is good. We got about 4 minutes, but we got about 3 minutes or so left. But this has been enjoyable. This has just been two guys we've been sitting down here just chatting about what's on our mind and how we've been feeling about some of the activities that are happening to us now. And we have age now that we've got quite a bit of experience, and we're saying, well, who's going to replace us? It's like I have to say, and I'm concerned about the issue of our young people. Got me. And it's getting, we're constantly hearing things like, well, gee whiz, it's so expensive here in Oregon. How can you make it? And I'm trying to figure out, well, what's happening? Why do we have to go that way? You got me? And how we folks being taxed out of their homes. You know what I mean? They're just taxed out of their homes. You get my point? And that's another area that we need to talk. And then the idea is about the number of weapons that folks are basically just for security, for their own welfare, having to purchase just to maintain their sense of gee whiz, I feel comfortable now because I got a 50 cal in the backyard, I got a 50 cal in the front window, and then I think I'm safe. But at the same time, gee, I can't go to work. I can't leave my home because if I leave my home, people know where I bought the guns, and they're gonna come and take the guns, and then it gets sold on the. It just goes on and on and on.
Well, the way to look at that is when you ban something,
right,
then people got to get it. It's so it's like, say next week there was a doll show out at Expo,
right,
and so it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, a real big deal. So on, say, Wednesday or Thursday, they come out, we're going to ban Beanie Babies. Well, that weekend, they'll go out there and they'd scarf up all the Beanie Babies.
Right.
See, so when you go to, and they say they're going to ban this stuff, and then the people go out and buy it because they got to get it.
Right.
And so by doing that, which isn't going to do anything for the crime.
Right.
And in fact, you mentioned, illegal guns. When I was back to my officers' basic in Aberdeen, Proving Grounds, Maryland, Baltimore had a buyback on buying guns, and some enterprising teenagers got together, automobile aerials and stuff, made 50 zip guns that they got $50 a piece for. Then I went for my officers' advance, and one of the officers there, Captain Tate, real neat guy. He was a signal officer. Anyway, we're talking, and the subject of guns coming. He said, "Oh, they had that buyback, and about 6 or 7 months later, some of those guns that they bought back were out on the street." So somebody in the police department was selling it out the back window.
Oh, police are that?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
And he was telling me, because I didn't know at the time about these teenagers, but Captain Tate told me about it when I went back for my advance. He says 50. They made 50 zip guns, sold them for $50 a piece.
Oh, hey, look, I tell you what, where this conversation is going right now, I think we may have to continue this conversation aspect of it. So it look like we're going to close up on this end of it, and look for us having this chat, if you will, on the part of the series aspect of it. So we'll do another show like this. Okay, good. Well, we've enjoyed chatting between John and I. Hopefully you can do that with your neighbor and chat a little bit, and maybe grab a young person at the same time. But we want to continue talking about our issues here in the local area. Take care. I'll see you next round. Thanks, John.
Yeah. When you get through that, guy says that.